Hi, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to please leave a thumbs up and comment on the video. I like to engage with my audience on a personal level, and of course check out the Patreon link if you want to donate to the channel and keep it running just that little bit smoother. So today I'm looking at Ark Nova, and you'll notice there's no box here, there's nothing in the background. That's because I don't own a physical copy of this game. It was released at Essen and there was barely any copies and I wasn't able to get one. You had to queue for something like 90 minutes just to be able to get one of the 10 copies that was there. I mean, you'd have to be crazy to do something like that, right? But with this case I thought, you know what, I'll wait. But I played it several times at GridCon, like 3 or 4 times at GridCon, and I've played it multiple times over Tabletop Simulator. So I have played this game enough times to give it a decent review, and I don't want to wait until like February time whenever they release the retail version so that I can actually get a physical copy in front of me before I do the review. I want to talk about it now before the year ends. Now with Ark Nova, I had hopeful expectations going into this one because we don't really have a thematic zoo building game, do we? Think about it. New York Zoo from Uri Rosenberg. Abstract tile laying game, whatever, and I don't even like it that much. Zoological, a pretty abstract tile game again. There's not really a proper thematic feeling of building a zoo. Dinosaur Island is probably the closest thing we've got, and that's dinosaurs. That's a somewhat different style to just building a zoo park with animals. So I really wanted this one to be good. I needed, it's like, please, please, don't mess this up. It was kind of my thought process for this. But I decided to bide my time and wait, and then when I got to GridCon I was able to play it then after watching Paul Grogan's tutorial video, which definitely go check that out. Seriously, you're gonna need that before you play this. More on that later. But yeah, I was pleased to get it done. Question is, did it meet those expectations? Let's find out. In Ark Nova, you will plan and design a modern, scientifically managed zoo. With the ultimate goal of owning the most successful zoological establishment, you will build enclosures, accommodate animals, and support conservation projects all over the world. Each player has a set of 5 action cards to manage their gameplay, and the power of an action is determined by the slot the card currently occupies. After you use an action, you move the card back to the original 1 slot and move the rest of the cards up. So using the same action multiple times means that you'll use it at a lesser strength, whereas waiting and biding your time means you can then perform an action at a higher strength. As you progress through the game, you will be able to flip some of these action cards in order to make their effects better. There are over 255 cards featuring animals, specialists, enclosures, and conservation projects, each with their own special ability and plethora of icons. Players take it in turns, occasionally stopping for a coffee break, which is essentially an admin phase where you'll reset your hand size, reset the display, and collect your income from various sources. The game end is triggered when your appeal marker and conservation marker cross paths. At this stage, there is endgame scoring, and then you compare the distance between the 2 markers. The highest distance is essentially the one with the most victory points, and of course, that person. Of course! With over 250 cards in this game, building your zoo is down to you. Will it be successful? Well, that's your job. So starting off with duration, this game does go a little bit on the lengthy side for your first game or two. It's got a bit of a learning curve, and you're certainly going to need to accept that it's going to take you a good 3 hours plus to play your first game with about 4 players or so. When you decrease the number of players, the game length does reduce quite dramatically, but you can get a solo game of this done relatively quickly. I know about 60 minutes you should be done with a solo experience, even if you are thinking quite hard about the game. Now there is an element of downtime between turns, because yes, you are planning what you're going to do with your various action cards, but while someone else is doing their turn, you kind of need to wait for it to get back round to you, and this is most noticeable in a 4-player game. Now the game, even when it's ticking over quite nicely, should still take you in the region of a couple of hours at least to play. With 2 players you could get this down lower, but 3 or 4 you're definitely looking at 2 hours, 2.5. It's a heavy, long Euro game, therefore it has the length to justify it. But all in all though, it doesn't feel like you're sitting there waiting for everything to happen. There is an element of downtime, as I say, but there is a lot to plan. There's a lot of different cards to look at. You've got the stuff in your hand. You're trying to plan at least 2 or 3 turns ahead. So you're pretty much engaged throughout, and you're interested in what other people are doing. You need to know if they're going to potentially nick another project off you or such. So you're not going to just sit there twiddling your thumbs waiting, at least not if you want to do well in this game. The setup and takedown isn't too bad either, because it provides a couple of token trays similar to Feast of Odin, where most of the tiles are already in those trays. So mainly, all you have to do is shuffle a ton of cards, lay out a display, put the 2 trays somewhere, and give each player their starting cards and map. That's kind of most of the setup really, although it will take a fair amount of time to actually teach the game, more on that in a minute. For ease of play, this is mostly positive. The rulebook is pretty good, although some rules are a little bit hard to find in there. It's quite text heavy, it's not the best structure that they've used, and certainly for cases like endgame scoring, they don't half waffle on with this long-winded preamble about how endgame scoring works when it kind of boils down to just compare the distance between 2 markers. There's a few little obscurities like that, but generally you should be able to learn this game fine, but I do recommend watching a video. I already mentioned Paul Grogan's video earlier, highly recommend you watch that because that's how I learned the game first, and certainly it helps. It cut down the learning time considerably to have someone just kind of explain it with visual guidance. Now that's not to say the rulebook's bad, the rulebook's decent, and you get a separate glossary booklet and an icon reference sheet to get you through all the different terminology and iconography that's in this game. Those 2 are invaluable and they work wonders. That's to say, the iconography is actually fairly intuitive though, when you get down to it. You look at it and you go, oh my god, what is all this? Icons everywhere! 21 gigawatts! But calm down for a little bit. It's not as bad as you think. When you get to deal with the anatomy of the card, the fact that, right, there's the icons it gives you, there's the restriction, there's the restricted enclosure, that's the ability keyword, oh, and that's the text of the ability. It's like in other games where it gives you the keyword for the ability, but then explains in text what the ability does. Some of the sponsor cards have got a similar deal where it gives you the iconography for what it does, but then it tells you in text what it does. So if you don't get the iconography, you can just read the card, and you should be able to understand most of them when you see them for the first time, but there is quite a fair bit to absorb. That being said, I have seen examples of this game where games have taken forever to play their first game because 4 people have come into it brand new to learn from the rulebook. There's a lot of rules to absorb. It's not the best way to learn, as I say, but that's not, as I say, it's not stupidly complicated, okay? It's a heavy euro, so you're gonna need to go in with that mindset. But because of its relatable theme, a lot of the stuff just kind of flows naturally. When you're doing turn after turn after turn, you realize that the turns themselves are not particularly complex. It's more the amount of options that you have, which is the difficulty curve. Doing your turn is pretty straightforward. You just choose one of your 5 action cards. Everybody's got the same action cards. Resolve it, do it in full, move it, slide the other cards up, job done. There's my turn done. And once you do this about like 5-10 times in a row, it just sort of clicks. And then suddenly the hard part is learning about how to do well. But honestly, that's the fun part, as we're going to get onto very shortly. I especially like how there's little tweaks to the starting setup and objectives that make it easier for players to get into. Objectives, for example, you normally have to take 2 objectives and at the start of the game decide which one you want to keep. Well, I don't know how the game plays. How am I supposed to know which objective to keep? Here, you don't do that until about halfway through the game when it triggers from the scoreboard. Such a simple enclosure, but why doesn't every game do that?
What am I, psychic?
That's so good. Halfway during the game, I figured out which objective I'm going for. Sweet, Chuck, this is the one I'm doing. Perfect. On top of that, you've got all the different maps. You can have an asymmetric map with a cool special power if you're used to the game. Give that to the advanced player. You can have a basic map with no setup. Again, give that to maybe the advanced player if you want to keep the game simple. The beginners can have a map with pre-built starting setups and a nice income track, so to make it easier for them. So you can tailor the difficulty based on everybody's experience. And believe me, if you are a beginner at this game, start with the beginner maps. Right, tactics and strategy. Woohoo! I've been looking forward to this bit. Oh my word, this is fun. This is such a fun game. You can strategize to an extent, but the most part is tactical. People compare this to Terraforming Mars a lot, and granted, there are similarities there. The card system is very much like Terraforming Mars, the action selection system is straight out of Civilization: A New Dawn, but both those elements work so well here. That action selection mechanic, I loved it in Civilization: A New Dawn. It's on my shelf in the other room, and I want this mechanic used in other games. This is what, the 2nd time I've seen it used? used, let's use it more often. It's great. Having to decide, right, well, I want to use that action, but I need to use it at that strength. So that means I need to use these other actions. Well, what can I do with them that's useful while this one leads up the track? Have I got one of those X tokens that boost the strength? I might want to use one of these because I need to get the action done now. You know, timing is key. Which actions do I not care about? Some animal I play says you can shift a card back to the 1 slot. You know what? I don't really need sponsors for a while. Let's shift that one back and move this up. It's just such a rewarding puzzle to do that. It really is. I love this mechanic. Put it in other games, please. So many different cards. Terraform Mars has a ton of those in it, and this one is no exception. Over 250 of these cards as they all come out and offer different strategies. When you start the game, you have 4 out of 8 cards to pick and 1 of 2 objectives to kind of gun for. That will last you about a quarter of the game. You really are going to need to change up what you do as you go through. And that's the great thing. Because at the start of the game, I'm thinking, right, let's see, I need a bunch of animals with water icons. I'm probably going to be going for like crocodiles and reptiles. All right, well, let's go for that. I got a couple in there in my hand. Right, cool, we'll start with that. Quarter of the game, I'm kind of done with those. So suddenly I pick up a sponsor card. It's like, ooh, an owl hut. Okay, I'll play that down. That allows me to do really well with bird cards. Okay, let's go hunt down the birds. Ooh, look, King Parrot and Cherokee and, is that a bird? I don't know.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
I do love animals, but I'm not an expert. But as I say, you just pick up all these different things as you go through, and it's fun to see your zoo evolve with the cards that you grab. Suddenly I'm obsessed with birds and I'm trying to build the biggest aviary ever. The asymmetric boards lend some like cool ways to play with like simple but effective asymmetric powers, as well as an asymmetric map that changes up as you go through. Now, interactivity is a little limited. You don't actually influence other players apart from the occasional negative effect from some cards, but if you don't want any take that in the game at all, you can actually use the alternative abilities at the bottom and have a nice game. But frankly, the take that stuff in it is very minor. No time have I ever played this with people where they've said, I wish that the take that stuff wasn't in it, because it's more of an annoyance. It's not crippling, and it's not even on that many of the cards. It's just in there, but you have the option to take it out, so you know, happy days for everybody. In terms of the rest of the interaction though, it's more keeping an eye on what other players do. As I say, I won't influence what cards you have in your hand or what you play, but the timing of when someone might trigger the coffee break, the timing of when somebody's going to nick a conservation project before you do, because there are public objectives for other people to go for. I think, right, I need to get a bunch of Europe icons on my guys, right? Okay, I'm leading up to that one. So are you. Hang on a minute, what do you think you're doing? And so you need to at least pay attention to what they're doing. But yeah, you are kind of making your own little solitaire game on your board. Not necessarily a huge negative, but you kind of have to expect that from a lot of heavy Euros these days. But it's all about building the combos with said cards. As I said, you're only going to strategize for so long. You'll find other opportunities. You'll see a card come out that's like, oh, that suits what I'm doing. Yeah, that might give me the special enclosure I could really do with filling that up. And then you gun for it and you work towards building it, figuring out what income you need, what resources you need. It's just, it feels rewarding. It doesn't feel restrictive. If you need money, there is a way to get money. If you need enclosures, you can build enclosures. You have space on your board. You have to really shoot yourself in the foot to really put yourself in a crippling position. It's just a case of you having to pick your battles and decide, well, I would love to play the African elephant, but that's a lot of requirements. That might be a little bit out of my range. You know what? Bye-bye Indian elephant. I'm going to make this little porcupine enclosure instead. Yeah, it's just so rewarding. It's engaging. It did exactly what I was hoping it would do from a mechanical perspective. Now, the aesthetics for this are a little on the weak side, sort of. Component quality is fine. They're basic tiles, there's nothing particularly amazing about them, but they do the job. And it's nice to have the 2 token trays in there. They do make setup a lot better. The card quality is fine as well, although I probably do recommend sleeving them, and I know 200 and something cards is a lot, but it's probably worth it. Just grab yourself a couple of packs of Sleeve Kings and you should be good for the most part. I think 3 packs should cover the entire box. But the artwork is divisive for some people. Some people hate it, some people like it, and it's not artwork per se. The artwork on your map is fairly basic. It doesn't look particularly great, but it's functional. You know what everything is, everything's laid out, the income track is clear, tells you what buildings you can build, the various bits where you put universities and partner zoos on is clear, so it's functional. The cards themselves are basically photographs. They're photographs of the animals or photographs of people, except some of them, mainly the sponsor cards, have had a filter put on them. So it's like they've been put through Instagram effectively. Whereas the animals are just a straight up photo. Now, people complained about the use of screen caps in Terraforming Mars, and I was one of those people, because it's just like a random screen cap of an asteroid or screen cap of some random, like, filtered setting. It's like it didn't really suit Terraforming Mars. Here though, it works because, you know, what's more beautiful than animals, really? Animals are great, they're fantastic. And so whether somebody draws a nice picture of a fox or I get a photograph of a fox, then I'm fine with that. And these photographs are not rubbish. It's not like I went out with my mobile phone and took these pictures. Somebody took care. This is done by proper wildlife photographers and they look good. Close-ups, you know, flight shots of owls and stuff. It's like, it really does look good. The cards are fine. You just got to accept that maybe some of the other tiles and that have just got fairly basic art on them. There's nothing in here I would consider bad, except for the money. Oh my god, I hate these money tokens.
Oh, yes! I hate this! It is revolting!
Horrible money tokens. It's like, it's basically just a square with a number in it and it's grey. It's like the worst cardboard money I've seen ever for any game. Instantly, this gets replaced with the villagers coin box chest that Sinister Fish games did. Honestly, use whatever substitute you have for money in this game. Do not use those grey counters. It's a nitpick, it's not destroying the game or anything, but seriously, the money sucks, replace it.
Wow, that was pretty brutal even by my standards.
No backsies.
Now for Immersion. Oh, finally, I can talk about Immersion where it actually has some rotten immersion. The amount of dry games that come out this year, it's nice to actually get one that's thematic. It is. This is surprisingly thematic. Now, yes, you are just mainly playing cards and they give you icons and various abilities, but everything makes sense to what you're doing. The animals, the icons that they give you make sense. If I play a cheetah, I expect it to have predator icons on it. If I play an African elephant, I expect it to have African icons on it. It's not like they put these random icons on animals with no context. Even the sponsor cards make sense as to what they do. Like the Wazi project, you know, if you know anything about that, then what it does in the game makes sense. And so there's definitely a thematic background to it. But even though the action selection mechanic is very mechanical, this whole shifting of cards on a focus row here, it's basically what you do in the game feels like building a zoo. This is my zoo, and this is one thing that Terraforming Mars doesn't quite get right for me. You know, building on that communal map, I don't feel like it's my Mars. You know, I feel like it's just the Mars and I put stuff on it. Here though, my zoo, my enclosure, I do what I like. And because I'll admit, maybe there's a slight bit of bias that because I like animals. If you don't like animals, why are you playing this game? But if you're a fan of animals, you're going to enjoy looking at all those pictures. You're going to enjoy going like, right, I'm going to focus entirely on monkeys.
Monkey.
Finally, I get to use that meme. But with that, I can say, right, I'm going to play as many monkeys as I can. I'm going to hunt down those, and suddenly you realise that your zoo is basically one giant ape playground. But then, as I mentioned before, I decide, right, I need crocodile water icons first. And then suddenly you find the bird house. And you think, right, now I'm going to build loads of birds. And suddenly I've got like tons of birds flying everywhere. Everything just feels like building a zoo. There's mechanical elements to this game, for sure. Do I feel like I'm building an actual university? No, it's basically a tile that gives me icons. But that theme is in there. Whether that's self-injected to a point, maybe? But one thing that people do not say about this game is that it's dry. No one's walked away saying that. Everyone has said that the theme is strong. Whether they're getting into it as much as I am is another question, but they still never say it's dry. Golem, Messina, Batoku, everybody says they're dry as they'll get out. This one though doesn't. And finally, it's finally a thematic game, and perfect for a zoo game as well. I was so afraid that this game was going to be just full-on mechanics, no theme whatsoever, and like disregard that zoo theme, which, let's face it, has not been utilized enough in games. But nope, I'm pleased to report Ark Nova definitely is probably the most thematic zoo game out there at the moment. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'd certainly like to know in the comments, but out of what I've played, that's the way I see it. Longevity is pretty good here as well. You have got a ton of maps to pick from. You can pick the beginner map, you can pick the standard map, or you can pick, I think, one of 8 different asymmetric maps that are fundamentally different from each other, not in terms of income track, but the bonuses you get from the universities and the partner zoos, the layout of the map, the special ability. Just that alone is already pretty good on the asymmetric side. But then on top of that, did I mention 250 plus cards? There's a lot in there. You won't even go through the whole deck, not even 3/4 of that deck will you go through in a 4-player game. And that's not to say you will play all those cards, that's including the ones you just scrap because you either are forced to by the coffee break or because you can't physically play the card. You can go through a lot of cards in the game and you won't play a lot of them. So the next game you see them again, you go, well, you know what, I can actually try and go for the panda this time. You know, I'm gonna go for it, let's play this panda. And so every game feels different. You're going to see some cards pop up again, yes, but I'm positive that even after the amount of times I've played this game, there are cards in there that I probably have not even seen yet, let alone read enough to be able to play the card. It's very possible I've just never seen it, or barely looked at it, and so the next time I play it, it could come up and I'm like, ooh, that's something new, sweet. The different enclosures and the tiles and the buildings don't really change up much, and certainly the bonuses and the association board and the action cards, they're going to be the same every game, but they're the crux of the mechanics. It's really down to just that massive stack of cards, all the different objectives, the different conservation projects, which having those out at the start of the game will dictate a different flow of the game as well, because if the objectives are thinking more about specific regions, and suddenly that becomes more interesting than trying to get specific animal types, and so on and so forth. If you want to expand this game out, then by all means, you know, just give me more cards and I'll be perfectly happy. Let's have 500 cards in that deck. It'd be a nightmare to try and store at the table, but it'd be fun. And then if you want to play it solo, you can. This game scales fine at, 4, 3 and 2 players. It's just game length really, but I'm pleased to report the solo mode is good as well. Very straightforward. You simply have a little tile with cubes on it, and every time that you do an action, you move a cube to the right. Once it gets to the bottom, you have a coffee break, so you don't trigger it yourself. But then you remove a cube and stick it somewhere else in order to basically shorten the game length. So all the rounds between coffee breaks get shorter. You have 6 rounds of this to finish the game and have your 2 markers, the appeal and the conservation, cross each other. Do so and you win the game. Straightforward, target, no point trial nonsense. It's just meet this condition and do it. And to tailor the difficulty, you simply start on different parts of the appeal track. Start on 20 for beginner, move it down for intermediate and hard. But it's so easy. There's no complex AI. You simply just do your turn and then move a cube. Do your turn, move a cube. Straightforward. I mean, I've been playing that on TTS quite a bit lately, that solo mode, and because the setup's not too long, I can see myself getting the full game and just playing this solo on a regular basis. I dare say, more solo than in multiplayer. But that's not to say I don't like the multiplayer. I want to play this multiplayer as well, but I can play it at all player counts and have a good time. Perfect. So as you can tell, despite the small negatives that I have mentioned and the things that you need to bear in mind, oh my god, I love this game. I love this game.
You're not sleeping with it, are you, Ray?
I've been so disappointed with 2021 so far. I've been like, oh, this game's great, but it's not the perfect. Oh, this game's good, but there's still flaws. There's very few titles this year I've been able to kind of stand on top of the mountaintop and go, play this game. Finally, I can. Ark Nova did exactly what I wanted it to do. It gave me fun mechanics. It gave me a solid theme. It gave me a decent longevity. It scales well for player counts. Now, granted, you need to accept that there's going to be a learning curve for this game. You need to accept there's a lot of iconography to absorb. The rulebook is decent but not perfect, and it's going to be a long affair. It's a heavy Euro through and through. It is for heavy gamers and no one else. But, great animal theme. Decent photographs on the cards to really bring you in. The different asymmetric maps, all those cards, that engaging action selection mechanic. I love this game. I only expected to play it once at GridCon. I then jumped into another 3-player game at the last minute on the next day, and then Mark Danes, even not board gaming, requested I teach him it, and we got an extra game in. My friends were kind of jealous of this fact, but me, I was just like, yeah, I will gladly teach this game because I want to play it and play it and play it. This is one of those games where when I've played it, I want to repeat again. I don't care if the game took me 3 hours. I want to spend the next 3 hours playing it again. Try a different map. Get different cards. Solo on Tabletop Simulator worked an absolute treat. The mod is decent. It works great for whatever player count. And I've been playing that. Honestly, Ark Nova, you have saved 2021 from being a bit of a lackluster year, frankly. It's, there are very few games I can think of this year that I gave a 10 to. But this is one of them. Yeah, Ark Nova, 10 out of 10. This game is brilliant. Seal of distinction from me. I have pre-ordered this game. I cannot wait for it to arrive. I am so actually annoyed that I didn't stand for 90 minutes in that queue to get a copy of this game, because I so wish I did, because it would have been 90 minutes totally well spent. I love this. If you like animals, if you like the sound of the action selection mechanic from Civ: A New Dawn, if you've got any sort of liking for like the Terraforming Mars card thing, then give this one a try. But honestly, even if you don't like Terraforming Mars, give this one a try, because I think it's different enough. But if you do compare them similarly, then whatever. Terraforming Mars, boom, is gone for my life now. I was warming up to it, but frankly, if you give me a choice between that and this, I'm going to play Ark Nova in a heartbeat. For me, this destroys Terraforming Mars. But as I say, tomato, tomato, apples and oranges maybe. You tell me in the comments whether you consider the two to be similar. But yeah, 10 out of 10. I love it. Absolutely love it. Can't wait for my copy. Oh, so good. So that's it for me on this video of the Broken Meeple. Do you agree with the thoughts? Do you disagree? Would you compare this to Terraforming Mars? Do you like the action selection mechanic? Have you seen it used in other games? Are there other zoo-based games that I haven't mentioned or not been aware of that you think I should know of because I like the zoo and animal theme? By all means, get it in the comments, let me know, and I'll be sure to respond as soon as I can. Until next time, thank you for watching this video. Remember to leave a thumbs up and comment if you enjoyed the video. And if you want to check out more content on the channel, you can check out the recent podcast where I talk about the recent affairs that I had at GrinCon, including Ark Nova, or you can check out the recent filler compilation review I did where I go over 6 different filler games for your pleasure. Take care, and remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.